Hello. What do you think? We good? I don't know. Yeah, it's been broadcast, and it's also on the international website that we put. Yeah, I don't know. We good? Okay. All right, we're going to give it a shot. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. We're going to begin the slideshow momentarily. This is going to be an experiment in progress. We're all going to be a part of it tonight, okay? So I'm going to put that there, and we'll see if that works. Okay, let's bow for a word of prayer as we get started. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for this opportunity to come tonight and see this wonderful place and these people in Israel. We thank you for the opportunity to remember Jesus and the places he walked, and for the many other people of faith who have lived there, who live there now, and the people who go there. We pray, God, that you bless our church as we worship tonight through these pictures, and we pray that you would help all of us to draw a little closer to you because of it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, so here we go. We're going to give us a shot, and I'm going to stop it sometimes and tell you some stuff, and the other parts I'm just going to let it go. And then if it gets to 7 o'clock, we'll just probably see what we want to do from there. Okay? All right. Israel Pilgrimage 2010. Welcome to Williams. This is just a satellite view of Israel. You see the Dead Sea and all that. This is something I want you to see on the West Bank. You'll see some walls throughout here. The walls are new since I had been there. New since the year 2000. And the West Bank belongs to the Palestinian Authority. It's heavy security. You see Bethlehem is behind the wall. Jericho is, and some others, and it's continuing to be carved up. There's just a honeycomb network, and you'll see some of those pictures in there. The 1949 Armistice Line is the line that was drawn after Israel became a country in the year of 1948, after World War II. So we'll look at some more of that later on. This is a picture from an Arab website that shows lands they used to own that are now taken up from. And this is my drive. This is my first look of Israel, driving in from the airport at Tel Aviv. There's the wall separating the West Bank from the Israeli side. This is just a town we passed with a minaret, which is a mosque. And this is my first look of the Sea of Galilee. So we're coming in, you sort of see the Sea of Galilee in that hazy mist there in the foreground. The Galilee region. This is where we stayed, and you see over the other side is desert, so most of the area is sort of like an arid, desert, rocky, very, very hot place. This place is owned by German Christians, Benedictine monks, a monastery is there, and it's a well-watered garden. It's real pretty right there on the water. That's from my room. And that's the first thing I did was to go down the Sea of Galilee. So this was the first day and about 10 minutes after I got there. And it's just a panoramic view from my little camera. And that is Tiberias. Tiberias was there in Jesus' day. And 2 boats on the Sea of Galilee. Real pretty. That's the Mount of Mount of Beatitudes right there. All right. So, if you can see, right up in here is where we just saw. This is the church, the Mount of Beatitudes. Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount. And the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, and so forth. Right down in here is the area where the monastery is, and just past that is the place where Jesus fed the 5,000, the multitudes, with the fish and loaves. And right on down the shore, we'll see later on, is where Jesus met Peter. At Capernaum for the first time, and then later on, after he was raised from the dead, he met Peter again in a place where the docks were for the boats, and they fished, the 7 Springs. We'll see all that in a minute. And this is where I would go pray most every day that I was there, just sitting on the rocks and seeing all that beautiful stuff. That's my roommate, Marcus, who's pastor of St. Paul's Methodist Church in downtown Birmingham. And these are little fellows who are all over those rocks. And they're mentioned in the Bible, called hydraxes, mentioned in the Old Testament. So they're around. They didn't bother me. And, you could talk to them. I didn't hear them talk back, so I think I'm okay. But they were strange, and they had some sharp teeth, but they were friendly. All right, first day, sunrise, and are on our way to Capernaum. In Capernaum, everybody know about Capernaum? What do you know about Capernaum? This was the hometown of Jesus. When he moved to the Galilee area as a young man, he moved and lived in Capernaum, and this is also the hometown of Peter and many of the disciples. It's the first place Jesus probably preached on a regular basis, and he called his disciples around this area. It's all ruins today. In fact, a lot of this, Capernaum was a really big place. It's only part of it has been excavated. And it's run by French Franciscan monks. This is just some of the ruins that's been excavated. There's an olive press, an oil press. That's our guide, Claudia. She is a Christian, Arab. About 2% of the population of Israel is Christian. Almost all of those are Arab Israelis. The Christian population has been fast dwindling over the past 20 and 30 years in the country of Israel. Arab Muslims don't trust Arab Christians, and Israelis don't trust any Arabs. So it's pretty hard for them. She said there were about 7 Christian families left living along the shores of the Galilee. So she doesn't even have a church. She just goes to the tourist churches. This is a house, and what we found there when we get to Capernaum is there were like big complexes and several families would live together. You, your wife, your kids, your grandparents, her family, they would all live under the same sort of complex. This is just the ruins of it. The one on the right over here with my cursor is a church. It looks like a flying saucer. And it is built over one of the oldest churches in the world, the house of Simon Peter. It's right down there. Christians met in his house. Jesus was in his house and healed his mother-in-law from the Bible. After that, Byzantine Christians, after the year 325, Roman Empire becomes Christian, and that period is known as the Byzantine period. The Roman Empire is officially Christian. After that, we begin to see a church shaped with 8 sides. That was the pattern of their churches, and they built it right on top of his house. Then several other things were built on top of that house too. And finally, this church has a glass floor that we'll see in a minute. You can look down and see it. But first, we're going to go to the synagogue, which is where Jesus preached when he was there, and that's the ruins of it here. There's different views of it. Now we're going into the synagogue, and this is built on the spot where Jesus preached, but not exactly the same as his. There's some very handsome guy there. I don't know why y'all laughing. I don't get that. Anyway, yeah. You need the hats, by the way. You need the hat. These are the seats, and this is where people would sit when they would come to the synagogue for their worship. It was also like a community center. People would have debates and talks and news and whatever. And this was a place to meet. I'm just going to see some of the stuff here. All right. This was the ruins. The synagogue would have been a pretty big one and a lot higher up than we see here. This would have been a door. And if you were a woman, this is the only way you got in the synagogue. You had to go up, climb the steps, and go upstairs and be really quiet. And you stayed up there and you observed what the men discussed about the destiny of your town and also about your religion. Get that out of the way. That's looking back from those 2 columns. All right, now we're at the Flying Saucer Church. All right, underneath the church are the ruins. They're the 8 sides of the old church, and this in here, the small area, was the center part of Peter's house, where the first Christians met, and where Jesus ate and healed and taught. And there's a better picture of it. And that's looking down through the glass floor. One thing I thought it was interesting is I always thought of Peter as being a very poor man, a poor fisherman, but his house complex was the second house down from the synagogue, and you don't get that prime property and that big of a complex without being a man of means. So he may have owned some boats. He also, we know, was allowed in Jerusalem when Jesus was arrested and taken to the high priest's house, Caiaphas' house. Peter was the only disciple that was allowed to get close enough into the courtyard. He must have been a Jew who had means or had connections. We don't know. We'll go to that place later. This is called the Cliff of Arbel, and we're going to go up there. It was very misty, very hazy every morning, and so you had to wait till the sun burned a lot of that stuff off, and so we went up there in the late mid-afternoon. And this, we're going to see this little path. This is the path Jesus probably walked when he first came to the Galilee. And that's called the Valley of Doves. You see the Sea of Galilee back there. The Valley of Doves. And this is the main walking pathway from Nazareth to the shores of the Galilee. So it's very likely that that's the way Jesus came. And we're going to go on up there. Another view of it. And that is the modern town of Magdala, Mary Magdalene. It's from near here. And you see the caves and stuff over here. This area for most of its history has been a sort of a Badlands area, hideout for outlaws. Zealots in Jesus' day hid in these caves from the Romans. Others throughout time have hidden there. And this, just for historical interest, is part of what they call the Horns of Hittim. If you've ever seen the movie The Kingdom of Heaven, it's about the last great battle in the 1100s that the Crusaders fought against Saladin and the Muslims. And the Crusaders lost that battle. This is the last big battle, and the Crusaders leave Israel never to return. They were there for a little over 100 years, trying to take the Holy Land for Christians. In the movie, you'll see some of it, but if you know from history, they decided to wear their big armor and march from Jerusalem up here and some other places, and they were really hot, and they took the high ground thinking that was better, but the Muslims burned the low ground, and the flames just swept up, and most of them were burned to death. And that was the last battle. This is all the group that went with us. There's our guide again. You see those caves? Very steep cliffs. I took this because I thought of the thistles. And you didn't run through those thistles. They would get you. This is a view from the cliff of the Galilee area, and just sweeping all the way around through here and up into here to Bethsaida and Capernaum and all this stuff. And this is the main ministry area of Jesus Christ. And it's not that big. Not that big of a place. And it's easy to see. When I was there, I realized it was easy to see how the word of Jesus could spread up and down through those villages and towns, and how people could easily flock to him wherever he happened to go, and how hard it would be for Jesus to get away. And they have hay bales over there. And these are big hay bales. They're bigger than ours. And they have donkeys. That's Tiberias at night from my little balcony area where I was. This is sunrise, and there's several pictures of it. I'm just going to let it go. This is sunrise over the Sea of Galilee from our balcony where we would all meet. That's some of our group that got up that morning. I'll let you just watch the sunrise. Now we're going to the Mount of Beatitudes. This is Chris, who was at one time pastor of 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham. And he read the Beatitudes from Jesus. We all listened to that. And we'll talk about this area down here. These are all bananas. It's a banana field all down in there now. This is the church. Very touristy, though. There's that banana field. All right. I've always thought that Jesus stood up on top of this mountain and spoke down to people. But most of the people there who live there say that Jesus probably was down in here, and this is a natural amphitheater. And people stood all up and through here, and you could actually hear somebody down here talking, and you could hear what they had to say. So he may have preached up. Who knows? There's that guy again. Yeah. And this is the church built. This is the ceiling, gold. It's beautiful. And the Beatitudes written on the windows around there. How many windows? Anybody know how many Beatitudes? 8? 8-sided churches, 8 Beatitudes. Okay. That's the altar there. Beatitudes written in Latin up there on those windows. That's the church, a little prayer garden that you could go to where we went and prayed. Blessed are the poor in spirit, the paupers, in Latin. It's one of my favorite pictures that I took. We're walking down now. We're going to walk down, and this will give you an idea from the Mount of Beatitudes. We're going to walk down, and we could easily walk to all of these places along the Galilee where Jesus ministered, where he fed the multitudes, all those kinds of things. Very close. I went jogging one day for 30 minutes, and about 15 minutes out, I had run from where I was, past the feeding of the 5,000, past the docks where Jesus met Peter after the resurrection, and also up to this place. So it's not that far away. It keeps showing up. I don't know what to do about it. This is on that path going down, just out on the Sea of Galilee, zoomed in on a boat out there. There's looking back. You see the banana field and how this sort of begins to see the shape of an amphitheater. By the way, they have overfished the Sea of Galilee, so you cannot fish there anymore. Very few fishing boats or boats of any kind out there. This is the place of the feeding of the multitudes. There's our path. That's Dr. Lloyd Allen. I wanted to get a hat like this, and Mary would not let me. And he had one, and he said, you put that hat on and take a picture. And so that's what we did. Dr. Lloyd Allen, y'all have seen him here before, the guy with the bow tie. Church history and spiritual formation and Baptist heritage professor at Mercer, at McAfee. Nobody knows for sure about all these sites now, okay? But this rock has an inscription on it, and they say this is where Jesus gave the Great Commission. Matthew 28. Somebody know that one? Go ye therefore? Okay. So who knows? This is in an evening. And this was a cave that many people think where Jesus went to be alone. And that makes sense because it was so hot. And that's the view from the cave looking back out. And he didn't go a long ways away. I always thought he did. The Church of the Primacy of Peter. Anybody know what that would be? Is there a path walking up to it? Roman Catholics believe Peter was the prime disciple, that Jesus gave him the authority to lead the church upon this rock. They think, meaning Peter, Jesus would build his church. And so the popes all trace their heritage back to Peter. And so this is where they think that happened, where Jesus met Peter after the resurrection and said to him 3 times, do you love me? And Peter says what? Lord, you know I love you. And Jesus says, feed my sheep. 3 times tells him to feed the sheep. So this is why it's Church of the Primacy of Peter. Real pretty place. Springs coming out of the mountains here. This is a statue commemorating that time. And these are the original steps of the docks, probably where Jesus was waiting. The water, up until probably 2000 or so, came up to this place. the water has been drained off from the Sea of Galilee to irrigate Israel. And we might talk about that a little later, but it's really gone down. Something must be done. These are the original steps here where the fishermen would have gone near the Seven Springs area. We talked about that at baptism for Allie. And above those steps inside is a big rock because they built the church over it. So there's the steps. You would have walked up these steps, and there they are from the other side of it. And inside, where the church is built over the rock, and a lot of churches are, is the rock. This is the shoreline where you remember Peter is in the boat fishing. Jesus has died and been raised to life, but the disciples, for some reason, go back to Galilee and start fishing again. And somebody says, hey, I think that's Jesus on the shore. And Peter jumps in and swims on in to the beach and finds Jesus with a breakfast of fish over a fire. I actually did that. I swam all the way down from where we were staying, way down here, all the way around with two other guys, and we swam in. And there were some Asian guys there fishing with a fishing pole, and they caught a fish, and they had a fire going. And I talked to them for a little while, as much as we could communicate. But I thought that was pretty neat. This is that rock inside there where they believe Jesus had the fish breakfast and where he really restored Peter. You could go up and touch it and pray on it, which I did. Okay, the Church of the Fishing Loaves, my favorite place in the Galilee. And this is their little sign here saying that Christians from around 28 A.D. had been going to this rock right there on the shore and praying and worshiping way before there was a church. 350, somewhere in that time period, a church is built. So one of the first churches built in the world. And they built it over the spot, they believe, where Jesus laid the basket that the little boy had brought of fish and loaves of bread and multiplied them to feed many, many people. The church was destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed, and in 1932 they were doing some work there and found where that rock was, and they found some mosaics that date back from the 300s. And we'll see those mosaics. Little tiles on the floor that make pictures. There's some there. And this is inside this church, all discovered in 1932. It's an icon. See all those all over. And this is the altar over the rock. And this is the ancient mosaic of the fish and loaves. We'll see it up close. There was a rope that would not allow you to get closer. The monks could sit here when they had worship privately, but you couldn't get closer. And y'all remember my story about sneaking under there? Hopefully. I asked a German nun who only spoke German, and we had seen each other a few times, and she looked around, and basically they let me slip up under there. And so it was, to me, a great privilege. I actually got down on my knees, and I crawled up there. I kissed that rock, and I prayed there for a while. And I cried there, to be honest with you. So I'll get some pictures that I don't think anybody else got. There's back from the back part of the church. And then we're going to see some more mosaics. Pictures from around the Sea of Galilee from that time. There's the mosaic of the fish and loaves and the rock. That's turning around, looking out. You see the font of water here, holy water, and the olive tree. Right here's part of the base of that rock that goes on down in there that the church is built over. Coming out, we just have some more of this wine presses, olive presses out there. And that's the church from the outside. And this is a little prayer path that I took. And some of these Sunday nights when we do our prayer experiences, I have a lot of slides and pictures I didn't include tonight. So we'll do that, and we'll walk that prayer path for a little bit, and that I did. And one time that gate was locked, but you could jump over it. Wasn't that high for me? But anyway. This was the way I would go in from the monastery into that place. Let's go to Nazareth. There's two places that they claim where Mary was when she received a visitation from the angel telling her that she would be the mother of Jesus. And she said what? She said yes. And we're going to talk about that. That's a big yes. This is the Eastern Orthodox Church. Without getting into a lot of details, the Roman Catholic Church, in essence, split into two. So the Roman Catholic Church is based in Rome, even to this day, and the other part of the church, they don't consider themselves Roman Catholic. They call themselves Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox. They don't call their pope a pope. They call him a patriarch. And they have built their church over the only spring of water in Nazareth. So they know for sure that Mary went to get water at this place, along with her family. And they believe Mary was at the spring when the angel came. So this is their church, and the Orthodox churches look very different. They pattern after the Old Testament. Inside this curtain behind that is the altar, sort of like in the Jewish religion, where you couldn't go up to the Holy of Holies where the ark was in the temple. There was a tent or a curtain. Some of y'all remember when Jesus died, that curtain was split in two. So they go back there, and if you're in worship, the priest will go back there, and they will break the bread and do the Lord's Supper stuff, and they will come out and bring it to you. But only the priest can go back there. But all decorated up. Most of these people throughout history could not read or write, so they used pictures to worship. And they also believe that this is the place where someone first composed the prayer, Hail Mary. And so this is Hail Mary written in a variety of languages, the first line of it. And then we're going to see the spring, which is down in a big hole in the floor. And there it is. Water's still gurgling in there today. It's the only spring. This is the other site that Roman Catholics say is the place where Mary was, at her house, which was a cave, where most of the people in Nazareth of that day lived in caves on the hillsides there. Remember, Nazareth had a hillside, right? Jesus was taken to the brow of the hill to be thrown off at one point when he was older. But this is a huge church and a beautiful, beautiful place called the Church of the Annunciation, the announcement of Gabriel to Mary. Couldn't take enough pictures here to show you this stuff, and it's so big, so you'll just get some of it. This is a cave that they discovered several years back when they wanted to expand on. And you see back in there, people lived back in there. They had their animals, everything, and there was a complex of caves system that they excavated out. This was discovered there. And we know that this was all in 614. The Persians came from Iran, and they destroyed all the churches in Israel, every one, except for one. We'll get to that later. They destroyed all the churches, and then later on they were rebuilt. They were destroyed again by the Muslims in the 1200s as they came in. So there's a lot of that going on. This is something they date from the 1st century A.D., and it has the name of Mary on it. So if somebody carved Mary's name in this rock, which was part of a building in Nazareth, they just carved her name there on the site where Catholics say Mary received. There's the M, A, and here it is, sort of written out for us a little better. But it's right in that little section, and they brought it out for us to see better. They also found pottery from the time of Abraham in this area. This is the door of the church, and this church is huge. The main floor is up here. You would go downstairs, and this is the church built over the cave where they believe Mary had her home. Mary and Joseph and Jesus lived there. Maybe. And they've got it well gated off for American tourists. There's a picture between the fence. That's the Jerusalem cross. We'll see that a lot of places. And this is now going upstairs, and just beautiful pictures everywhere. And all over the place on these walls are pictures donated by nations of the world to commemorate Mary. This is from the United States. Mary likes it a lot. I don't like this one as well, but they're all different. This is behind the altar upstairs. There's that Crusader cross, the Jerusalem cross. That's the ceiling, the big dome that looks up. And I just couldn't get a good picture of it, hardly. I like this one the best from Japan, to me. But that's the outside of what we see of that church. While we were there, we went outside and we sang and we prayed and we talked about that story. And while we were doing that, the bell started ringing. And I have a little sound clip of that I'll play at some point for y'all on Sunday night. At the same time, the Muslim call to prayer was happening over the minaret. So it was just a bunch of stuff going on. That's a group coming out right there. That's a group from the Philippines that sent theirs in with Mary and the angel Gabriel. As we walked on down to go eat, we walked by a little park area, and this is a Muslim preacher and all these men, and I've got him recorded very loud. He's got a microphone and a loudspeaker. And our guide, who was Claudia, that you saw earlier, said that he was spewing hate toward his neighbors in Nazareth. I don't know what all he said. It's a typical little shop there. Now we're going to make Mount Tabor. You might know what happened to Mount Tabor. We're just going to look at it from a distance. I didn't go up to it. Some did. I did something else. Anybody know what happened in Mount Tabor? Jesus took 3 disciples up that mountain one day. When he came down, there was a demon-possessed boy. You may remember now? It's also known as the Mount of Transfiguration. Mount Tabor. We'll see it a lot of places. There's one of the distance of Mount Tabor. This is just driving around on our journeys just so you can see the towns and the villages. Olive groves everywhere. Those are olive trees. There's a McDonald's. I didn't partake, but you know it. They read right to left now, so you see how that goes. There's McDonald's, and it goes the other way. This is part of my prayer garden that I would walk through that I call a prayer garden. They didn't, but that's what it was for me. There are figs on a fig tree there. A lot of fruits and flowers. This was a pretty walk for me. And I did get off the beaten path, by the way. Those are pomegranates, I think. I took a lot of pictures of flowers and stuff. I went that way quite a bit. Some olives on the tree. We had olives breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they were good over there. This is where some of the monks would go to worship. There's the Sea of Galilee. And this is where the water used to come. This was the shore. And they have an altar, we'll see, right there on the shore. It's now receded quite a bit. There's their altar where they would worship. And you see sort of how the water level might have been. That was all the water that's been siphoned off. Hazor. It's a very popular name, I'm sure. Hazor was one of the few fortified cities under Solomon. It has 24 layers of civilization, so it goes way back. And they've excavated certain parts of it. This is where the grain and all that kind of stuff was kept. It was a fortified wall city on the main route from Egypt up to Mesopotamia in the Middle East, and so they would have probably have charged a toll for people to go through here. You wanted the high ground and you wanted to control the roads. And in here we're going to see some bricks made with straw, and there they are, still there. And there's a close-up picture of it. You can sort of see some of the straw, how it was made. That's an old olive press, how it would have worked. This was the way they got their water. The water sources oftentimes were outside, and when they wanted to fortify the city, they built tunnels to bring the water from the outside down maybe in that valley through a tunnel system so they could get water here. And they cover over the other part, and so people could siege, they could withhold with food and water as long as they wanted to. This part was dug by King Ahab under his time frame. Remember Ahab and Jezebel? These guys were everywhere, and they weren't little. You see them? Oop. And we're going to go to the watchtower on the edge here. This has not been excavated, but this is probably where most of the people lived. And this is what they call, this whole area up here is called a tail, T-E-L. And what happens is layers of debris, when places burned or were destroyed or conquered, and they were put down, and then stuff was built on top of it, and then trash on top of that, and it just went on and on and on. 24 layers here of civilization, and the little place that might have been sort of high gets higher and higher and higher. And a lot of it's just covered over. This has not even been excavated at all. And this is part of us up on that watchtower, which is now part of a national park. These are original gates that Solomon, in Solomon's time, these are Solomon's gates going into this place. Caesarea Philippi and Banias, and we'll visit this place another time. This is coming in from places that used to belong to Lebanon, taken in 1967. This is sort of an oasis, you might say. And Jesus took his disciples there. This lady was baking bread, flat bread, putting it on this hot oven, and putting honey if you wanted, which was what I got, or chocolate. And it was good, very sticky. This is Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus took his disciples, and after they left, he asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" And then he asked, "Who do you say that I am?" This is a grotto that the Romans used to worship the god Pan. So they call this place even today Banias, after the god Pan. Druze worship on the top of the hill. There's a whole bunch of other stuff, and we'll hear about it later. This is a Roman bridge from the time before Jesus. Baptism in the Jordan River. I think y'all remember that I got baptized in the Jordan River. I always wanted to do that, so it was a way for me to remember my baptism. And this is a little place that you can go. This guy over here is Bobby Bowden. He was there to see me get baptized. So I'm going to try something. They videoed it, so we're going to try and see if it'll work. And this is Lloyd Allen, and he was talking during my baptism. And just in his hat or something, but maybe you can see some of it. And you'll hear somebody holler for Bobby Bowden on my baptismal video.
They were firing rockets while he was in Tiberias, so they had to stay inside.
Wow, it's just interesting.
Are we ready to go?
Okay.
I was going to say, come on, do some code up and down here. There's the camera, I'll take the camera.
We're going to code it. I already did. Yeah, I already did. We did it there. All right. We're on our way.
Hey, Bobby, we're going to be over here.
Baptize your life. God's Father, God's Son, and God's Spirit.
Okay, that was pretty meaningful for me. So I'm going to go right there. That's about the only place you can go now to be baptized in the Jordan River, because the Israelis have cut the water off. The water from the Sea of Galilee traditionally goes through the Jordan River all the way down south to the Dead Sea. We saw that on the satellite picture earlier. But most of the Jordan River itself is inside Palestinian Authority territory. So the Israelis have cut off the water. It's just sort of a trickle in a lot of places. There's a place called Yardent where they baptize. We got to ride on a little boat out on the Sea of Galilee and had the Lord's Supper out there. There's a captain. No, I'm just kidding. Thank goodness. And that's our boat. It looks like it could have been around back in Jesus' day. This is some of that shoreline that we have been on, seeing the mount. Here's the primacy of Peter. Peter was probably right in here when he swam in to Jesus. There's the Mount of Beatitudes, banana field. They cover a lot of those bananas up. This area is called the area of the Seven Springs. Y'all remember, Allie, when we did the baptism, we talked about this. The fishing was real good here. This is where your water came from. I put in your baptism. Little springs come out. There are several that just come out of the ground here. This was a big waterfall. I can tell you about a story of a Russian Muslim I met there, but we'll talk about that another time. This is that lonely place that we sat in earlier that you saw on our way down from the Mount of Beatitudes. So, you know, it wasn't that far away. Who knows? But that's one of the few places you could go to get out of the sun. Jesus might have prayed there before he picked the disciples. We had the Lord's Supper while we were on the boat. And two of the folks who were with us are Episcopal priests. And they led us in that. And there's that church again. This gives you an idea of how far the Sea of Galilee water level has dropped. This is a pier where people would have docked their boats for a little sightseeing area in Tiberias. And there's a lady fishing, but it's way down in Magdala. You remember Mary Magdalene? They recently discovered the ruins of the synagogue in Magdala, which was probably one of the first places Christians around the Sea of Galilee went to worship. They went to the synagogues. And then they also discovered, when the water was down, a boat from the 1st century. This is a fishing boat, not very big. And one thing you noticed from seeing the pictures, there's not a lot of wood around there. So this boat has 12 different kinds of wood in it. They pieced together what they could. And that's what a boat like that would have looked like in Jesus' day. That's a fishing boat. Tel Megiddo. Everybody heard of Megiddo or Armageddon? Megiddo was one of those fortified cities like Hazor. And we see here sort of the Hittites, the Assyrians, all this stuff, the Babylonians, Iraq and Iran today. And coming all the way through here is the Hittites. This is sort of called the Fertile Crescent area. Egypt's down here, and Israel's sort of in the line there, isn't it? Many great superpower battles were fought on the plains of Megiddo. And some believe the final battle will be fought there too. So also, it was an ancient place. This is a model of Canaanites worshiping, where they would slaughter animals and even their children to worship their gods there. These are gates during the time from Solomon, those rocks. You went in. This is a big place. And they found something really important there. I don't know what it is. Dwayne said he read about it in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution while we were there. They're excavating. You see these folks working under those big black tents, ongoing excavations. And this is just this Jezreel plain here. And this is back near the coast, Mount Carmel. Really a mountain range where Elijah went in that cave, hid out. This is the actual place. We saw the model a while ago. This is an ancient altar for the Canaanites where they would worship, sacrifice to their God. It's been discovered. That's my roommate there again. By the way, this was excavated several times. The first few times they did it, they took bulldozers and just went through there and plowed it all up. And so who knows what they... That's a whole big view of the panoramic thing. And there's Mount Tabor, to give you an idea, and Mount Carmel way over here. This is a place where they stored grain up in that area. You see the steps going down to it. So this would have been the main granary, or the place they would store that for their town, their fortified city. This is our group. These were stables where King Solomon kept some of his horses. There were many horses and chariots housed around here. These are the troughs. And all that's left, some of this has been rebuilt. Some of this would have all been covered over. You see a little model of a horse there, eating out of the trough, and each one having its own little stable. There were some cows up there for some reason. I don't think they were Solomon's. And these are actual from the days of Solomon, troughs that the horses would have used. It's a major military site there. Caesarea Maritima, Caesarea by the sea. This was built there were no natural harbors, a man-made harbor by Herod the Great. So also the place Paul was taken when he was arrested on his way to Rome. He was kept in a prison underneath this grounds right here, down in the dungeon, literally. This was Herod's palace right here on the edge, and there's a big swimming pool out there that you'll get to see. This was the hippodrome where they raced chariots and did all kinds of other stuff. All the people would watch. On the Mediterranean Sea. It's really pretty. This is the oldest and maybe the only known inscription anywhere where we see Pontius Pilate's name written, along with Emperor Tiberius. And it was found in this place. There's a little closer. You see the U.S. Pontius and then Pilatus. They're used like these, Pilatus. You see a swimming pool back there? There's guys swimming over there, and if I had known we could have done that, I definitely would have done that. There's a swimming pool. And this is all the excavations that they had dug down in this area and found. The hippodrome area where people sat, and this is what it looked like. They didn't excavate that so you could sort of see how far down. The Crusaders came here. This is one of their main ports when they came in. They built a big castle with a moat, like they were used to building in France and Germany and so forth. There are anchors that they found in this harbor, rock anchors. This was an aqueduct that was about 8 or 9 miles long that brought water, a Roman-built aqueduct that brought water to Caesarea by the sea. No pumps, it just flowed. They knew how to build them. Are y'all ready to go to Jerusalem? Okay. Here's the Dome of the Rock, and this is on the spot where the temple of Jesus' day would have been built. This is part of the wall. This is not the original wall that Jesus would have known. So a wall built in the 1500s, but this is all considered the old city of Jerusalem. And these two domes are the domes of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre that covers over the tomb of Jesus where he was raised, and also Golgotha where he was crucified. It's a big complex. We get a lot of pictures of this. It's just beautiful. This is my first day just walking around. I got some pictures of Jerusalem in the old city streets. These guys hammed it up for me. They were playing soccer, and they took the time to pose. That's where we stayed in Jerusalem, the Pontifical Institute, Notre Dame. Tristan, that's that little girl with a white rabbit I was telling you about. Graffiti on the walls there, and they do need peace. It's one of my friends who's a Methodist minister in Birmingham. On the outside, see these guys everywhere. I didn't take a lot of pictures of Orthodox Jews, but there were a few that I want you to see. And also some Muslims that you'll see. Some Muslims ladies shopping there. A lot of stands like this. A lot of olives, marinated in all kinds of stuff. Last day I was there, I got some peanuts at this place. These folks did not want me to take their picture, can you tell? But she was probably very poor. That's just driving through the streets there. Now we're going to go up on the Mount of Olives and take some pictures and walk. We're looking across the Kidron Valley. And here's my little map. Gethsemane, Mount of Olives. Okay. Here was the old temple of Jesus' day. Fortress Antonia, where Jesus was taken and condemned under Pontius Pilate, and begins the walk of what we call the Via Dolorosa to Golgotha. Now the church, tombs, all in that area. Maybe one owned by Joseph of Arimathea. Kidron Valley runs through here. The Hinnom Valley, and down in here is a place called Gehenna, where people threw their trash and it burned all the time. And also ancient people worshipped their gods by sacrificing their babies down in there. It was a place of death and destruction. This is the old Jebusite city, if you're familiar with the Jebusites. But David was. He conquered this and became David's city. And this was David's city, King David. We'll see some stuff through here. Hezekiah's tunnel, some other stuff. Got a good map in the back of your Bible, probably. It'll look like that. So, Mount of Olives. And we're going to walk down the same, it's paved now, but it's the same path Jesus walked in his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. You saw all those graves there? Whoops, hit the wrong thing. You see all those graves there? Let's see if we can go back here. And what would happen is people would be put in those bigger graves, those tombs, And when their bodies would decay and there would be nothing but bones left, they would collect the bones and put them in small boxes called ossuaries, and the boxes would be about the size for a skull to fit in and the longest bone of your body, and they would put them all in there. This is a burial spot, and this is just open, but some of these are from the 1st century. It's a Jewish cemetery, and some of those boxes have Christian symbols on them. These are some of the first Christians buried here in Jerusalem. We don't know who they are, but God does. This goes way back up in there. On the Mount of Olives was a big cemetery. And here's looking across from the Mount of Olives to the old wall city. This is called the Golden Gate. This is sort of an interesting tradition among Jews. When they visit the grave sites of their ancestors or relatives, they bring rocks as a memory rock. Instead of flowers, like we often do, the rock is just a way for them to do that. And you see rocks stacked on these. Some have lots of rocks. Oh, that's Hebrew. This is the path now paved that Jesus took on his triumphal entry on Palm Sunday. And now we're going to the Garden of Gethsemane. These are ancient olive trees, some as old as 2,000 years. And this is the church called the Church of All Nations because all nations contributed to its building, which is built over what they believe to be the Rock of Agony. And that's the church I was in when I felt a strong call to the ministry back in 1985. So it was special for me to go back there. And that's the rock. Rock of Agony. And there's a picture of the guys with the torches coming to arrest him and Judas kissing Jesus on the cheek. There's some nuns kissing that rock, like I did. A couple of pictures from the church. And that is the oldest olive tree on the Mount of Olives in Gethsemane. We know that when the Romans, for example, came and destroyed the temple in Jerusalem in 70 A.D., they cut down all the trees on all the hills around Jerusalem. So everything was cut down. But olive trees, you look at how they look, olive trees are dated by their roots, not the trunk. The trunks will grow up and they'll get all gnarly and some will die, but the roots will sprout again. And they will grow up. So this is dated by their roots. This is the outside of that church. We'll see some other pictures, I think. This is a place where we went to pray. We spent a couple of hours in there praying. There's Gethsemane. This is a Russian Orthodox church built there in honor of Mary Magdalene. That's that church again, the Church of All Nations, built on the Mount of Olives where Jesus prayed 3 times. This is the tomb of Absalom, the son of David. All on the Mount of Olives over there. Y'all doing okay? It's 6:52. We're good. Via Dolorosa, the Way of Sorrows. This is where they have what they call the Stations of the Cross. There are 12 stations. Some are in the Bible mentioned and others are not by tradition. You can watch the, what's that Mel Gibson movie now? The Passion of the Christ. And he follows all those 12 stations. They're all in there. And they're all marked. You can do that, and we did that on several occasions where you could walk the stations and pray and think and read about those places. And this is a place that's built over where that old Antonia fortress was. And this was a place political prisoners were taken before the Roman leaders, governors, whoever, Pilate happened to be there at that time. This is from Matthew. It has the name of Barabbas there, you remember? And so this is the spot where the crowd was. The pavement is original from that time. And we'll see that. This is just that area. And in this is the pavement. I want you to think about this. This is a Roman game that was carved in that pavement. And so the Romans were playing games while people were being condemned to death. Those soldiers were pretty jaded, weren't they? That's some of the grooves they carved so the horses wouldn't slip on that pavement. This is just what the old city would have looked like. Via Dolorosa. Hebrew, Arabic, and English. These guys are everywhere. Everywhere. And these are old-looking guys to me. Third station of the cross, where Jesus fell for the first time. All these things are marked as we go through. This is supposedly where Jesus met his mother Mary. This is a place where many people believe Jesus leaned against this wall, put his hand there, and so pilgrims from the very beginning have put their hand there, and that is indented in that stone. A lot of people put their hands there. This is just our walk on the Via Dolorosa, and this is just a little side courtyard. You could get a cross if you wanted to for a price, and you could walk the rest of the way. But we're going to go on into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the traditional side of the tomb of Jesus and Golgotha, where he was crucified. This was a place where they believe the crown of thorns was put on his head. And this is the ceiling of that church. It's really pretty. So now we're going to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I think I spelled it right. This is the roof, actually. And these are crosses from pilgrims, probably from Crusade times, who etched crosses in the rocks. And this is the way you'd go in from the roof. More pilgrims' crosses. The church has 7 different Christian groups that run it, and they are very strict on what area they get. This is an Ethiopian Christian. Remember the Ethiopian eunuch? That's not him, but he's from that tradition. They count their church going back to his time. And they own this first little section, and I asked him if he'd say hi to me, and he gave me a blessing. And he's got Crocs on. I did too. I like that. And now we're going inside the church, and it's going to be very different. Some sections are going to be Catholic, some are going to be orders of Catholicism, some are going to be Orthodox, some are going to be Armenian, Ethiopian, Egyptian Christians, all kinds. So it's going to look very different. This is the spot where they believe Jesus was nailed to the cross, all built over a big rock called Golgotha. But it looks just like a big church now, but the church is built over the rock. This is the place where the cross was put in a hole and Jesus was crucified. Okay? You could go in there and touch that rock if you wanted to. You'll see some of that. You go downstairs, you'll see the crack in the rock that went all the way from 2 levels down the base of that mountain or that hill. And there's somebody going up under the altar to touch the rock. And there's some of the pictures. There's a rock under glass of Golgotha, where Jesus was. And here's part of that crack in the rock from the top all the way down to the bottom. And this is the 2nd floor. This is a place they believe Jesus was laid after he was dead and anointed for burial. And every day the priest will come and put some kind of oil on it with rose flavoring smell to it. And people come and kiss that rock, and they put artifacts there. I put some stuff on that and rubbed it to try to get that smell. This is just a mosaic or picture over it that shows us where Jesus is taken down from the cross, laid on the rock and anointed for burial, and taken into these caves. And so to my right, to your right, is back up the 2nd floor, which is up the hill of Golgotha. Now we're on the 1st floor, down on the lower level. And on the left over here is actually where they believe the tomb of Jesus is. There's that rock. You see people putting their stuff out there. There's that crack. This is at the place of where the cross was. So when I got in line and waited about 30, 45 minutes to get up close, took some pictures. That's not me, but you could put your hand down in a hole there and touch the rock. Now this is the tomb of Jesus. It doesn't look like what you might think of. The story is that when Emperor Constantine of Rome became a Christian, his mother, who was already a Christian, came to the Holy Land and founded 3 churches, the 3 oldest churches in the world. and she asked people who lived there where these things happened. So she founded this church in Jerusalem, the Holy Sepulchre, and the Church of the Nativity, and the Annunciation that we saw in Nazareth. They say that under her leadership, they carved out, this is all rock in here, they carved it away from the mountain and built this huge dome over it. And later on, the Crusaders came and they built this that you see in brown here, or black, on top of the rock of the tomb. So it's actually got Crusader little church or chapel over top of that, and then it's still inside this massive building. And this has all been carved out of rocks. And back in here, we'll see there are still tombs or rock caves where people were buried. Maybe Joseph of Arimathea, they think. And this is just looking up at some of the ceiling there. Beautiful stuff. That's the entrance to the tomb. From back where I was standing, looking back through there. People worshiping and praying. And this is going back in behind that to where these caves were. They believe where Joseph Arimathea was. But we know people were buried in these little holes in here. And I lit it up. It's really dark. That's just a flash causing all this to be light. I didn't know what was in there. That's the top of the dome there over the tomb of Jesus. These are crosses etched by Crusaders. Very special to me. I spent a night there and spent about an hour or so just etching my finger over those crosses. And this is the main entrance to the church. That's me coming out of the tomb, the doorway. And these were some Franciscan monks who had a worship service there, a mass that they were celebrating there. I think some of these got repeated. Skip ahead a little bit. And I think I told y'all that I was able to spend the night there one night. And this is when we're locked in. These are big doors. This ladder is a good bit taller than me. And they're old doors, too. And they locked it from the outside, and they opened a little hole in the door and handed this ladder through. And it was on the inside with us. These are some pictures I took that night that I spent the night there in the church. Just some different places. There's that crack in the rock that runs down the lower level. And all that rock is Golgotha, supposedly. The stone of anointing. And this is the tomb at night with a lot of people in the church. And then they had the Russian Orthodox service I told y'all about, and this guy right here is definitely in charge of the whole place. Got his towel, threw it over his shoulder, and told us what to do. Y'all remember the people that were putting their hand in the hole to touch the rock under that altar? I did that, and of course this was late at night, and there weren't a lot of people around, so I looked behind it, and this is a hole where they think the cross was stuck in the rock. That's a glass sort of covering over all that. This is early in the morning as we get ready to leave. And I lit a candle for my family. There. That's those big doors. They're open now. The upper room. I don't know how that happened. I don't know about that. This is the upper room, and it's probably not the upper room, but I mean, it's on the same area. But I wanted you to at least see that, and that wasn't a whole lot to me there. This was very special to me. This is a church called Peter in Gallicantu, which means the cock crowed. So it's the place built over the mansion or the fortress of Caiaphas, the high priest. It is the place where Jesus was taken for sure. The night he was taken from the Mount of Olives after Judas kissed him, you remember he was arrested and he was taken to this spot. The church is built over that spot. We're going to go inside there. It's also where Peter was somewhere in these courtyards denying Jesus 3 times, and then the rooster crowed. This was a very moving place. These are actually the steps that they took Jesus after they arrested him from the Mount of Olives, and Jesus either walked or was dragged up these steps. And he was dragged to be spit on and mocked and abused and then turned over to Pilate and then crucified. And these are the actual steps. This is showing a picture of him in chains inside this church. It's a really pretty place. Built over rocks again. And this is a hole that goes down in the dungeon where they kept the prisoners. And they often would just tie a rope around them and lower them down through the hole. There was a guard down in there too, but this was the quickest way to get your prisoners down into the dungeon. So it's possible, but we don't know. It's possible that that Jesus was lowered down this hole. We know he was here. There's a icon or picture of Peter after he denied Jesus going out in this pain, and this is a picture of Jesus with that charcoal fire restoring him at the Sea of Galilee, saying to him 3 times, "Do you love me? Then feed my sheep." It's in that church. Now we're going down into that dungeon area where prisoners were kept, and maybe Jesus was down in there. We turned all the lights off and sat there in silence for a while, but this was the place. There's another area known as the Garden Tomb that was discovered under General Gordon, I think in the 1800s from England. And he was an Anglican. He said, "We don't have anywhere to worship around here." And he was looking out his window one day and he said, "That looks like the Hill of the Skull to me." And so they began looking and they found this, and we don't know if it's the right place or not. Probably not, but who knows. But it sure looks like what we in the West think of when we think about it. And this was the tomb, not a stone's throw away from that hill. And people were buried there, and that's where bodies were laid until they deteriorated enough. Go to the Temple Mount, and this is the area up here, which is known as the pinnacle of the temple. Anybody remember that from the Bible? Jesus was taken by Satan to the pinnacle of the temple and said, "I bet you can jump off, and the angels will not allow you to dash your foot against a stone." Jesus would not be tempted that way, would he? And this is known as the Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall. It's all that's left of the original temple of Jesus' day, Herod's temple, Solomon's temple. This is the outer wall, or the Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall. It's the most holy spot in the world to Jews. They have a fence that runs down through here, and women, you get to go on the right side in a small area, and the men have all this area to go through. There were women standing on little plastic chairs looking over the wall to watch their sons have their bar mitzvahs there. And so we're going to go look at that for a little bit. All sorts of folks through there. And these 18-year-olds who have to serve in the army for 3 years. This is going in the men's side. There's a guy blind and begging. And these 3 little kids talking to him. And these are Orthodox Jews who believe when Deuteronomy, y'all know that book? says that you should write the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. You should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That you should bind it to your foreheads, to your bodies, and to your doorposts. And they come here to pray and read the Torah, the books of Moses. And this is a crack in the wall where a lot of prayers, people come and write prayers on pieces of paper and put them in the cracks there, and there's a prayer for our church somewhere up in these cracks. And then I'm going to look, I think this is the next picture. I'm going to look straight up. Nope, that's not it. I guess I didn't get it on there. This wall goes all the way inside, and they keep copies of the Torah in these scrolls behind these curtains, and people will bring them out and read them. Here's a young man having his bar mitzvah. He has to read a section of the Torah. Now we're going to go up to the top of the Temple Mount area where the original temple of Jesus' day was, now been destroyed by the Romans. This is the western wall. You see these ladies? Look at them lined up there, watching their sons. They can't go up to them, though. And at the top, where the temple of Judaism used to be, is the Dome of the Rock. And where I'm standing behind me is a mosque. So the Muslims have this area. Obviously, a very touchy place. This is the third holiest spot to Muslims in the world. It's a spot that Jewish people believe Abraham took his son Isaac to sacrifice him on a rock in there, but found something else to sacrifice instead. Y'all remember that story? Maybe. And Muslims believe this is a place where the foot of Muhammad touched as he ascended into heaven to be with Allah. So it's a holy spot, and it's a beautiful building. I went in it in 85. You can't go in it anymore unless you're Muslim. So now we're going to Bethlehem. And remember that wall we saw earlier in the West Bank? And Bethlehem is behind that wall under Palestinian Authority. And it is heavily guarded. There are checkpoints. It's an amazing place. And there's a lot of graffiti on the Arab side of the wall, not on the Israeli side. And you'll see some of it. Here's one with the peace dove with a flak jacket, and he's in the sights. And I thought this was the most moving one I saw in Bethlehem of Christmas tree, but it's all walled in. We went to the shepherds' fields first before we went to the church. Shepherds went in these caves and kept their flocks by night. And it was here on this very site that they were visited by angels telling them, glory to God in the highest. And this is the entrance to the Church of the Nativity. The only church that the Persians didn't destroy. By the way, this was the original doorway, but too many people were riding their horses with guns in this church through the years, so they just blocked it off, and you have to go real low to get in. Ancient mosaics and gold and different colors. Just really pretty stuff in here. And it's a cave. It's the stable, but remember those caves? And this supposedly is the spot where Jesus Christ was born. And the star marks it. You go down in the basement of this church, and you can touch that spot. And then after that, that's where he was born. There's a place here where they say he was laid in the manger. So now we're going to see a little bit of the Dead Sea, just briefly, and Qumran. There's that good-looking guy out there. Man, it's a sight. You can't sink, that's for sure. It's thick water. These are some caves. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found here. The oldest scroll of Isaiah that we know exists was found in that cave right there by a shepherd boy who threw a rock in the cave trying to get his animals out of there. Heard it crack into a pot. This is Jericho, and this is the oldest sycamore tree. It's not that old. Not old enough for Zacchaeus to climb up it, but it's the oldest sycamore tree in Jericho, where Jesus was, and called the wee little man down the tree. And Jericho is probably the city that's been lived in continuously more than, it's the oldest city in the world. People have been living there, they say, for about 10,000 years, nonstop. Somebody's been living there. These are some walls that they've excavated. They're about 8,000 years old. This is the area where John the Baptist spent his time in the wilderness as well. A lot of stories from our Bible. Where I was looking, where you just saw, where I was looking, they excavated those walls. If we turn around to our right, we look and see the wilderness area. Jesus was baptized in the Jordan, and then he went into the wilderness and spent a long time. How long? 40 days and nights, and was tempted in the wilderness. And this is the wilderness, and this is the Mount of Temptation. And somewhere in history, monks built a monastery so they could go to these caves. So I always think of Jesus, and I'm thinking, where did he stay? He stayed in these caves, probably. 40 days, 40 nights. And they did the same thing. Sometimes through history, monks would live in those caves and never come out. And they would lower a basket down with a rope for people to put food in it in the mornings and raise it up and lower it down when they were ready again. This is a monastery carved into that rock. It's amazing. And they say that there are only 2 monks left there now. But I didn't climb up there and see. I thought you might be interested in some of this. This is Hezekiah's tunnel, which was built in the 700s BC to ward off the Assyrian attack of Jerusalem. King Hezekiah, mentioned in the Bible, is a good king, and they started digging this tunnel, which is about 7 football fields long. They started digging it in this rock underground from both ends, and they met in the middle. I have no idea how they did that. And there's still water that runs in there as well. Water from the Gihon Spring was taken from the outside of the city walls, remember, so they could withhold the siege, the battle, and they stayed in there. The Assyrian king said that Hezekiah was like a bird in a cage, but he didn't take Jerusalem. And they took this water, they piped it in this tunnel when the water still rushes through there. It's real cold, about the deepest part, up a little bit above my knees, and pitch black. You had to have a camera or a flashlight. It empties into the Pool of Siloam, where Jesus sent a man who was blind, and he put a paste of mud with his spit and told him to go wash in the Pool of Siloam, and he could see again. And so we're going to see all that. So about 5 of us brave souls went down in this dark tunnel called Hezekiah's Tunnel. A few little pictures of it. There's a water rushing. And it's dark, but I got a flash camera. Here we go. You can see how they etched this stuff, and it was pretty narrow and sometimes very short. That's where they dug part of the wrong way, and they said, whoops, and they came back. I don't know what they said, but there I am standing on one of those old columns which is in the Pool of Siloam. Now, Pool of Siloam, it was a lot bigger than this, but this is all that's left of it. Pool of Siloam. This is right here is a shop where I bought those that widow's mite with my certificate of authenticity. Okay. These are some of the original steps of the Pool of Siloam. It's just all dry through here now and covered over with all this debris from centuries of destruction and rebuilding and so forth. So this is where this guy came and walked in and washed. And then remember Oscar Schindler, Schindler's List? I thought y'all might be interested in that. He's buried in Israel. And look at the rocks on his grave. The memory rocks to this day. Schindler's List. We're just going to sort of end with some pictures of the sunrise in Jerusalem. You see some pictures of the city from the roof of that place where we stayed right here. So we're on the roof early in the morning, those who wanted, and these are just some pictures. And that's, you're going to see some of this is the Mount of Olives to the right, down that way. There's the Mount of Olives. Remember that Russian Orthodox Church? There's the dome with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre tomb. I didn't color that sky that way. It sure is pretty. Isn't it? See the wall from the old city? There's some more of it. That's the Mount of Olives. This is the main little gateway I would go in late at night or in the morning if I want to go into Jerusalem. This is the sunset on my last day there on the way to the airport. Go in peace. And that's it. And I cut them way down. All right. Thank y'all for being here. I appreciate it. If you got any questions, you can come up and ask me, but we'll let everybody go on and get home. We got school tomorrow and work. But thank you. And we're going to look at several more over the next few Sunday nights and pray and have a little visit and Bible study at some of these places. Okay? All right. Thank you.